In this episode of the Mesa Arts Center podcast, we talk with National Geographic explorer Nalini Nadkarni, whose research interweaves rainforest canopies with innovative public engagement, alongside the former mayor of Mesa, Mr. Jon Giles, who was a part of the leadership who launched the city's Climate Action Plan in 2021. As a city, Mesa has begun shifting their operations to reduce the impact on the environment through small steps and programs such as the Mayor's Legacy Project, Trees Are Cool. Please enjoy this podcast, and thank you for listening. Hello and welcome to the Mesa Arts Center podcast. I'm your host, Tomas J. Stanton, and I am here today with two remarkable humans, both who I know a little bit, and so I'm looking forward to deep diving into the world of trees. And I know when you just say that, just on its face, it's like, oh, I'm not sure that this is going to be interesting, but I guarantee it's going to be interesting. So we have the wonderful Mayor Giles of the City of Mesa, and we have an amazing explorer, Nalini Nadkarni.
Mm-hmm. That's
Nice.
right, Nalini Nadkarni.
Nice. And I just found out that you two have a little bit of a rivalry in regards
Yes,
to
we do.
universities. We won't dive too much into that, but
Good.
We're
but
going
what
to stay above that.
Yes.
It's going to be difficult, but
Yeah. So why you two are here today is because you are on tour and you're here at the Mesa Arts Center as a part of our Nat Geo as an explorer, and your background is in the wonderful world of trees.
Yes.
And Mayor Giles, you actually had an initiative here while you were the mayor of Mesa called Trees Are Cool.
Right.
And so I'm just going to say, why are trees cool? Go.
Well, I'm the less knowledgeable, so I'll kind of pitch it, for the high school age kids, and then Nalini can elevate it for the intellectuals that are listening.
All right, perfect.
Mesa, like a lot of cities, adopted a climate action plan because for obvious reasons. But particularly for obvious reasons in a place like Mesa, Arizona, where you're seeing extreme heat, you're seeing the impact of climate change in a very in a way you can feel it and a way you can see it, and we're seeing some very negative consequences. That last year in Maricopa County, for example, 645 people died of heat-related illness.
Wow.
We're going to have more this year.
Right.
And so in a place like Mesa, absolutely we need a climate action plan, but we need one that also is relevant to the topic of heat mitigation.
Mm-hmm.
And so we adopted this plan back in 2021. Like a lot of cities, it's very aspirational. We don't really know how we're going to achieve these lofty goals. We're going to have to, hopefully there'll be some technology and some best practices from other places that we can adopt. But clearly one of those things that we have to focus on is heat mitigation.
Mm-hmm.
And so last year we launched the Trees Are Cool initiative with this audacious goal of planting 1 million trees. And that sounds like just a pie in the sky. Well, why didn't you say 1 billion trees? I mean, what 1 million trees, is that an actual number, or is that just a way of saying a lot of trees?
An exciting hyperbole. Yeah.
That's right. And the answer is it's an actual number,
Mm-hmm.
because as we look at the tree canopy coverage that we have in Mesa right now, it's of course we're in a desert environment, so predictably it's not like it would be in the Midwest or something, but it's like in the 6 or 7% range. What we've been told by experts like Nalini, excuse me, is that what we need to aspire to is something more like 15, 16% to have the needed impact on our environment. So to get from where we are to where we want to be is 1 million trees.
Mm.
So it's an actual goal for us, and that's difficult, but that's great, and it's very challenging, and we're off to a great start.
Nice. And I love that. And I think I do have some questions that I think I want to ask in regards to that. But before we dive into that, with that contextual kind of framework and your career of expertise, what is your response to something like that?
Well, I totally commend what you're doing here, Mayor, and it's true for every city, but especially cities in the Southwest. I live in Salt Lake City, so we have similar kinds of initiatives, not as focused and not as expansive and really wonderful as the ones that you're talking about. But I think one aspect of why trees are important to people is exactly what you said, which is the services that trees provide. By increasing transpiration, that is the movement of water of soil up into the atmosphere, by providing shade, we're mitigating the negative effects of what we call the urban heat island, the fact that urban places, because of the replacement of soil and grass and vegetation with concrete, are going to be much hotter than what they would be otherwise, and humans need that. But I would say in addition to those sort of services that trees provide, I would say that there are many other values that trees provide, and I think this is one of the reasons why humans just love trees. I'll just say it right out there, including myself. And I'm speaking as an ecologist, as someone who has spent her life doing academic research on the effects of trees on ecosystems. We know there are ecological values of stabilizing soil, of providing oxygen, of mitigating temperatures. But there are many, many other values that humans and other organisms appreciate from trees. One of them are just the aesthetic values. Here we are in the Mesa Arts Center. People who come here are tuned towards the aesthetic. And so just the beauty of a tree, in silhouette against one of your sunsets here in the Southwest. The spiritual values of trees. Every single religion, every world religion, and I've done research on this, knows that trees have spiritual symbolism. The tree of life that we read on the first page of Genesis, for example. The fact that Buddha found enlightenment underneath a Bodhi tree. So I think there's something deeper than just the temperature being 5 degrees lower when we walk across a sidewalk in Mesa or in Phoenix. I think there are many, many other values that we as humans hold for them. I mean, just the fact that we're built like trees. We have crowns, we have trunks, we have limbs. That we venerate the superlatives of trees, the tallest trees, the coastal redwoods, and the oldest trees, the bristlecone pines that we find in Nevada and Utah and in our area. These are things that stimulate our imagination, that connect us to the natural world. And we know that connections to the natural world provide health benefits, emotional, physical, social benefits. So you've gotten me started on why trees are so great.
I love it. I'm so excited.
I could go on and take this whole half hour. But I think there's more than just the simple thread that we say, oh, that's going to make me 3 degrees cooler when I walk through a summer day in Mesa, Arizona. There are all of these connections that trees provide, from soil to canopy, across value systems, across services. And trees lie at the center of that.
Yeah. So I love all of that, and I'm totally nerding out right now. But I know we have limited time with you, Mayor Giles. So what I want to ask is, to your initiative of planting 1 million trees, which does sound like a lot, but also not a lot if you think about it. Nalini, what do you think? What is the strategy of planting 1 million trees? What type of trees are going to provide the most value in the context of like the heat index, but also everything that you said?
Sure. Well, I think, the idea of planting a tree is something that humans go, yeah, give me a shovel. I'm ready to go.
Yeah.
But we have to be really careful about that. And I think arborists, like my city arborist in Salt Lake City, and I'm sure you've encountered that here in Mesa, is you have to plant the right tree in the right place with the right commitment to maintain and preserve that tree so that it will flourish and maintain itself through its natural life. And I think many tree planting efforts, especially early on when people began saying, oh, we've got to plant 1 million trees, or we've got to plant tons of trees in our city, didn't realize that it's not just putting the seed or the sapling or the seedling in the ground. That's just the first step. It's like when you have a baby, changing its diaper is the first step, to having a healthy child. You also have to think about, how is that child going to get education? How is that child going to get the skills to be a contributing member to society?
Yeah.
And that's an investment that goes far beyond just placing the seed in the ground. So I'm sure that the mayor and your colleagues in the arboriculture world here in Mesa have been thinking deeply about the commitment that it takes to do that. And I know in Salt Lake City, since this is my first time here in Mesa, but I'm familiar with what goes on in Salt Lake City, really does have to think about the commitment to street trees. I think one of the most important things I'm sure you have thought about is which trees Are they native trees? We don't want to have a bunch of introduced trees that might go invasive, or the ones that aren't going to flourish here because they can't handle the heat and the drought that we experience here in Mesa. So the choice of a tree is very important, but also the irrigation systems, the watering systems, the commitment to the personnel and the staff that are going to have to take care of that is something that's intimately connected with the success of this work.
Nice. So to that point, Mayor Giles, do you have, with the Trees Are Cool initiative, the kind of like phase 1, phase 2,
Yes.
and where are we at currently in those phases?
Well, yeah, this plan is harder than it sounds, right?
Yeah.
Like you say,
I
that
so
we all have
admire it.
this spiritual and just cultural affection for trees, and so of course we all want to start digging holes and plopping trees in the ground, which is great, but it's not a good plan, right? It has to be more fleshed out than that. So one of the I'm excited. One of the things we've done is we now have on staff an urban arborist
Great.
that will take a very intentional, pragmatic way of helping us know how do you be a responsible parent of a tree, right? I mean, and as Nalini indicated, you have to, irrigation, particularly in a place like Arizona, if you just dig a hole, all you're doing, you're digging a grave for a tree, essentially, right?
Wow.
You've got to figure out how you're going to get water to that tree. And so that's part of all of our tree planting projects. Is there's a lot of work that goes in beforehand with city parks and rec people, or working with private property owners to figure out how to get the irrigation system there, how to make sure it's the correct type of tree. And then in Arizona, people know that usually once or twice a year we have these significant windstorms, and the streets of our city are covered in tree debris, and our cemeteries and our city parks every on a regular basis we're losing a lot of trees. So and how do you avoid that? Well, if you own a tree, just like if you're parenting a child, you have to be committed. It's not just changing the diapers; you got to stick with it. And so there's a lot of trees. For example, at my home, we have to every year have someone come in and do a lot of pruning. Otherwise, we're going to have a lot of broken branches, even lose trees. So there's a commitment to this that we have to become a little more sophisticated. We are, kind of desert dwellers. It's not, we don't have a ton of experience in being, good stewards of trees. And so it's a learning process at the city level, but at the home level as well.
Okay. So I'm gonna. This is where I love these type of podcasts, because we're talking about very important things, but also let's get to the root. No pun intended. I'm gonna ask you all, what was your first real deep memory of a tree, right? And that has nothing. This is to the spiritual thing, right? And I'll give you an example. I have two scenarios. One is, very quickly, when I was 8 years old, I was at a T-ball tournament with my mom and at a park, and I was climbing a palm tree, and my mom yelled to get down. I started coming down, I fell, and I broke my wrist. Never forget it. The funny thing about that, and I'll ask you this later, is I've heard palm trees aren't actually trees, and so that's a whole nother thing, right? Makes me even angrier. But another one is, one year my grandfather, who was really into the holidays, for Christmas, he bought a live tree as our Christmas tree, and then afterwards we planted that tree. And I would say it was about a 5 foot, maybe 6 foot tree. And that tree still to this day is standing, and it is probably about 20 feet tall, maybe, if I'm guessing right. And it's in they don't own the home anymore, but it's in the neighborhood that I live in currently. And every time I see that tree, it reminds me of my So those type of memories. What do you think was your first memories about trees?
Well, first, Tomas, I love that you asked this question, because I love asking people what is their significant tree. And I have to say, I have never found anybody who can't say, well, there's that tree I planted when my daughter was born, or that tree I climbed when I was, or any of those things. And in fact, I set up a website called Our-Trees, and people can send in their tree stories. And I invite everybody who's listening to do that. But from my own experience, I grew up in Bethesda, Maryland, on the East Coast. My dad was from India. My mother is from Brooklyn, New York. My dad was a Hindu. My mother was an Orthodox Jew. So, we had this sort of chaotic, mixed-up household, which is really funny. And so I needed my own little little place, my own refuge. There were 4 brothers and sisters that I had, and so I would climb one of the 8 trees on our parents' driveway. They had these 8 maple trees, sugar maple trees, and every day after school, I'd say, "Well, I'm going to climb Skinny Head today, or I'm going to climb, Big Arms today." Yeah. Sure, and it was really up there as an 8 or 9-year-old little girl, finding a place of her own, a place that was a place of peace, a place of refuge, a place that in my imagination I would share, as a rescue ship if the neighborhood flooded. But it was a place that I felt safe, and then I felt special. And I remember taking a little oath when I was that 8-year-old girl of, when I'm a grown-up, I'm going to do something to protect trees. And I didn't know what that would be. Well, I was a firefighter or a park ranger or something. But then in college, I discovered the world of ecology and this idea that people can study ecology and study trees and study the environment. And so that's what I chose to do. But all of this work that I do with conservation, with giving National Geographic talks, they all stem directly back to that little girl who was up, in the branches of her parents' maple tree, trying to fulfill that oath of helping trees somehow.
Yeah, I love that. That's cool. And I'll share something a little bit later about just how I talk to trees. It's just sound funny, but it's true. What about you, Mayor Giles?
Well, I grew up not far from where we're sitting right now at kind of University and Country Club, and in a house that had flood irrigation. It was my dad was a school principal. It was a modest neighborhood, but it was a great neighborhood, and we had a quarter acre, I think, probably, but we had a million trees on that piece of property. Valencia orange trees, pecan trees. I mean, they were fruit trees. We were connected to these trees because we harvested them and we juiced the oranges and we cracked the nuts and we ate the apricots, and so we really had a relationship with those trees. And so, like you say, I had a relationship with trees growing up, and I hope. I wonder if we've lost some of that. Trees have become ornamental. More perhaps than parts of our family, like they when growing up when you harvested fruit trees. So I've in the house I live in now. It's in an old citrus orchard, like a lot of folks in Mesa. But and this last year, frankly, I've had in the last 2 summers. I've lived in this house for 25 years. I've lost a citrus tree both of the last 2 years. Something is happening. The extreme temperatures that we're seeing now are not what they were when I was a kid.
Yeah.
I know it was hot when I was a kid. I remember playing Little League baseball at 110 degrees. So it's always been hot, but something's going on. And so we need to adjust the way that we be responsible stewards for our trees. Providing, figuring out how to keep these members of our family from, just like the people in our lives, and we need to protect them from the heat as well.
Yeah.
I think it's really interesting that you say that something is going on. We've lost some sense of connection to trees. And I don't think it's only because of the health or vitality of trees. I think also that there's so many now stimulations in our environment, especially for young people with social media, with computers, with the digital age, that distracts us from those essential relationships that we have had with trees and other aspects of nature. And so when I see a kid walking down the street, doing some game or some social media thing, instead of sort of like recognizing, oh my gosh, look at that Palo Verde tree with its green stems that are photosynthesizing. The stems are photosynthesizing. That's where I think we need to do something to not just awaken a sense of connection and relationship, but to reawaken what is actually, I think, in all of us naturally in terms of our connections and relationships with nature. Because there are now so many distractions in addition to the environmental issues that are providing difficulties for the trees that grow in our surroundings.
Yeah, I agree. I think as a father of young children, I know kind of the upside of technology, but I also witnessed the downside of that, and that is kind of the deeper we dive into AI and artificial intelligence and robots and things of that nature, the further away we're getting from life, if that makes any sense. And I think it's already hard to assume or to look at a tree as a living thing unless you really understand that. But it really is. And they're so important to who we are as humans, that if we lose that, what will happen?
Right.
So with that being said, how do we engage young people in a love for trees? How do we do it?
Well, I'll jump in here if that's
Please.
okay. One of the things I've said, well, what can I do to engage other people
Yeah.
in trees? And so I decided to make a little radio show. I went to my NPR station in Utah, in Salt Lake City, and I started a program called Tree Note.
Okay.
And it's just a 2 minutes about some cool fact about trees or the relationship of trees and humans. And I write these, and then I go to the KUER studio and we record them. And actually, we've made a little book of 365 of them that has been published by National Geographic. And they're just little bites, little tiny bites to wake people up to the wonder that are trees. So, for example, it's like, well, what kind of wood does a conductor use for his or her baton? Oh, well, what kind of wood are used in baseball bats? What about railroad ties? What about telephone poles? And why do peaches have fuzz on them? Like, how did that evolve? And so they're just little short pieces of facts and figures, not technical, not academic, but just to say, hey, remember about trees. Remember how trees are with us with every aspect of our lives.
Yeah.
And so that's one way that, that I, as an academic person who have access to, a radio station, can do that. But there are so many other ways that we can do that. I'm sure that you have thoughts and ideas about that too, Mayor.
Well, we have to be creative. Again, this audacious goal of 1 million trees, that we've got to as a city, develop a tree loving and a tree planting culture that far more so than we've had in the past. So we have been encouraging people to saying, hey, when you have family events, when there's a birthday, when there's a quinceañera, when there's something that you want to commemorate and add some meaning to, please associate that with planting a tree. I think it would be amazing for kids to say see that tree, that's the tree I planted when I turned 8 years old, or that's the tree that we planted when my grandfather died, or we need to come up with some social significance to encouraging people to. If this is a City of Mesa goal to plant 1 million trees, then it's doomed to failure, right? It's got to be incorporated throughout the community, and it's got to be the church groups and the social, the service clubs and the nonprofits, and everybody has to just kind of say, look for opportunities to get involved in this initiative.
Yeah. And I love that. And on that point, I think this is a great time to say thank you, first and foremost, for everything that you've done. Thank you for joining us this morning. I know you have a tight schedule, and you're going to leave us, and we're going to continue because I have a million questions, starting with why do peaches have fuzz? But what we're going to do is take a quick short break and excuse the mayor, and then we'll jump right back into it.
Great.
We're back. Yes. The magic of technology. The mayor was here. Now the mayor is not.
That's right.
So I have so many questions.
Okay.
I want to start with just a curiosity. Do we know that if trees predate humans?
Yes, they do.
Okay.
They evolved first about 400 million years ago.
Okay.
And they actually predated dinosaurs by 150 million years.
Oh, my gosh.
So that gives you a sense
Yeah.
of where trees are evolutionarily with people. They've been around for a long, long time. And in fact, they really helped to make the Earth habitable for us because they do photosynthesis. They started pumping oxygen into the air, which, of course, we need to live and breathe, literally. And also their roots, they exude in terms of the products of photosynthesis. One of the things that they exude is carbonic acid into the soil, which helps weather the soil, the rock.
Okay.
And so they were largely responsible, trees were largely responsible for turning this rocky planet into a planet where there's soil that is available for the growth of other plants.
Do we know how the first tree comes to become?
Well, it was the evolution of, sort of bacteria and then algae, and then, that allowed photosynthesis to happen, where we had small organelles that allowed for photosynthesis to take place. And those gradually, over literally millions of years, then evolved into plants that had stems and had what we call a vascular system, a conducting system that allowed water to move from the ground up into larger structures.
Yeah.
So they were also really some of the early plants like lichens and mosses. They don't have they don't have a vascular system, so they were sort of doomed to to live crawling along the ground. But there was one or multiple arms of plant life that sort of evolved this way of stacking itself up so that it could have a vascular system, which allowed it to colonize in 3 dimensions the life surface that exists on our planet.
Oh gosh, it's so fascinating.
Yes, it is.
I know that your work with trees goes deeper than global warming, and I'll be the first to say that I don't know a ton about global warming and things. I do know that it seems to be getting hotter. Something I heard about trees, and I would like to get your opinion on this, is that the more trees that we have, it does something where it reduces the emissions in the atmosphere,
right,
and it makes it cooler. Can you speak to that?
Yes. So the problem or sort of the phenomenon of global warming is really the result of increased carbon dioxide.
Yes.
CO2, carbon and 2 oxygen molecules that go up into the atmosphere. And that compound, CO2, has the property of trapping heat inside the earth. It can't get out once it's in. There are other what we call greenhouse gases as well, like methane and so forth. But carbon dioxide is the most abundant one. So that means the more carbon dioxide that we put into the atmosphere, the more heat is trapped within the atmosphere of our planet.
Okay.
And what we've been doing is taking fossil fuels, and you've heard the term fossil fuels. Well, those are the dinosaurs and the carboniferous trees that died and were compressed underneath the Earth's surfaces.
That's what a fossil fuel is?
And that's what a fossil fuel is. That's why they're called fossil fuels. So then we take that fossil fuel, that oil, we refine it, we put it through tubes and stick it into our cars and our gas tanks. We burn that up, and that carbon dioxide that was originally dinosaurs and coal and so forth underneath the surface of the Earth has been liberated and gets into the atmosphere of our planet, which then heats up the planet.
Yeah.
So what do trees do? What do plants do? They, through the process of photosynthesis, they suck up carbon dioxide into their cells, and they give out oxygen.
It's magic.
It is unbelievable
Magic.
It's exactly what we need to do. Need to happen.
Yeah.
We need to convert carbon dioxide into oxygen. So not only does it benefit us because we breathe oxygen, it also sort of pulls out the carbon dioxide from there and what we call sequesters or keeps it into a stable form in the form of tree trunks, which can live, as we know, 200 or 300 years. They fall, they die, they get decomposed and so forth. But for that 200 or 300 years that a tree is living, it has actually sucked out carbon dioxide from the air, reduced the capacity to hold on to heat, and is just holding on to it in the form of tree trunks. And same with the lumber in your house. That is also sequestering carbon.
Oh, really?
Yeah. And same with soil, the organic matter in soil. That's holding on to carbon dioxide in a form that is not gaseous carbon dioxide that's causing climate change. So that's why people very often say, well, if you plant 1 million trees, like you guys are trying to do here in Mesa, not only are you cooling this urban heat island by providing shade and providing more water vapor, but you're also holding on to carbon because it's not going into the atmosphere. It is actually sucking carbon dioxide out of the way.
Yeah.
And that is what is so significant about our losing forests. When we talk about deforestation in the tropics or deforestation anywhere, we're liberating that carbon that's been sequestered in the trunks and leaves and pushing it back out into the air, causing more opportunities for our planet to heat.
So is it safe to say that when we remove and the how did you say
deforestation,
that process,
yes,
is it making it hotter through that process and then also making it harder to cool off, or is it just making it harder to cool off?
Yeah, so if we increase deforestation, we're affecting the climate in multiple ways. Number one, by cutting down those trees, you're removing the shade, right? So that's going to heat up. You're changing the reflectability of that forest, and you're turning it, say you cover it with white concrete. Well, suddenly you get more reflection. You get, instead of absorption of sunlight, you're actually getting reflection, and you're getting more heat out. So that's 2 ways.
Yeah.
And then the third thing that we're doing is we're removing the capacity for those trees to suck up carbon dioxide through their natural process of photosynthesis and yield oxygen. So those are 3 ways that deforestation negatively affects the climate of our Earth.
Okay, so now I have a question coming from someone who tries to look at things in a very practical way.
Yeah.
So when we remove trees in the deforestation, we're doing this because we need to utilize what a tree can be converted into, right? Which is a lot of things. You mentioned lumber for houses, things of that nature. So we're using it because the globe is growing. People need houses, things of that nature. And so how frustrating is it for you and to talk about everything that you're doing in regards to the ecosystem and the importance of trees, but also find the balance of utilizing trees for us as humans to thrive?
Well, that is why I have gray hair.
Okay.
Maybe your viewers or your listeners can't see that, but I do have gray hair. It's because these questions are not easy to resolve.
They're not.
That there are always tensions, that there is always an imbalance, I would say, between the needs of humans and the needs of nature, so to speak. I mean, humans are part of nature, but when we talk about, yes, here's a farmer in Brazil who wants to use a plot of land to create crops for his family or her family. What do you tell that farmer? No, don't cut down the trees because we in North America want to be able to have fewer hurricanes and tornadoes coming through. Or do you say, let's think of some other ways that you might be able to earn a living? Or are there other ways that we can, deforest a small piece, but still allow some of the primary forest to remain, but do this work very intensively in one small part of that piece of land instead of cutting it all down.
Yeah.
So these are the kinds of things that forest ecologists, that forest managers, that political scientists, that economists, that sociologists are all trying to put our collective heads together. And what makes it really difficult is that at least in academia, which is my background, all of those topics I just said, ecology, management, sociology, economics, they're all in different departments.
Yeah.
We don't even see each other during the day, and we much less actually get together and talk together about how can we solve these interdisciplinary problems.
Yeah.
And I think what's really hopeful that I've seen in the last 10 years or so is that academics are beginning to understand that, in fact, they have to not only talk across their own academic disciplines, but they have to include others that are outside of academia. Forest managers, park managers, people like the mayor who was here. The fact that you can have a conversation with him about tree planting, and he was very open to saying, we need the arborists and the park managers along with us. So I think it's hopeful in terms of the solutions that may be coming forward, but I think we really have to disturb our sense of how things have been organized in academia, in government, and in society so that we can address these really complex issues.
Yeah, I love that. And I'm always on record that I think the best way to be a human is to look at it through the lens of interdisciplinary because we are interdisciplinary.
Right.
Just as humans in general. Like I laugh all the time because two of my favorite things to do outside of, be with my family and nap, I love napping, is to play basketball and write poetry.
Yeah.
In what world do those two things exist? And it's because I'm an interdisciplinary human.
Right.
And I think that sometimes you're right. We get experts who understand their lens, but that lens needs to mix with other lenses to create solutions.
Right.
So I appreciate you speaking to that because it is important. And I want solutions. I want the world to thrive for as long as the world can thrive. And clearly, we need people like you in the world doing that work. So, question: you're here for Nat Geo.
Yes.
That's to me, a really, really amazing thing. I remember reading National Geographic magazines as a child.
Me too.
And so how did that happen? How'd that relationship?
That's a great question. All my life as a kid, we had National Geographic. We were not allowed to cut pictures out of them, and nor touch the photographs. But I when I was in graduate school and trying to learn about forest canopies, which is my specialty, the field really didn't exist, and it was very hard to get sort of standard funding from it, like from the National Science Foundation or the National Institutes of Health. But the National Geographic gives out research grants, small grants, but grants nonetheless, to do research in faraway places on topics that are often interdisciplinary or a little bit off of what the typical sort of academic way is. So I got 3 or 4 of those grants as a graduate student and as a young professor. sort of continued to work with them on some of their educational things, writing articles, being in their television shows and so forth. And then just last year, I was named as one of the 10 National Geographic Explorers at Large.
Wow.
So these are people like Sylvia Earle and James Cameron and Maya Lin and, just really high-powered, just amazing, amazing explorers. So now I'm part of that group, and they asked me to give a tour to give talks about trees in different cities around the country and in Canada. So that's what brought me here to Mesa, to the Mesa Arts Center, which I'm so grateful for, to be able to really share what I've come to understand and know about trees, and not just in a single lecture, but also be giving a student lecture.
Yeah.
And I'll also be talking to some people who are in the Respite Center, which is a medical center that's designed for people who are currently homeless or unhoused.
Yeah.
So I'll be just from here, I'm going to be going to that area, that center, and share and learn from the people in that Respite Center about trees and about what they think about trees and about ideas that concern trees. So it's really been a wonderful opportunity to share ideas, to engage with people about this really fundamental part of our planet, which are trees.
Yeah, it's so important to me. It's one of my favorite parts of this job because the Art Center, speaking of things being siloed and, interdisciplinary, a lot of times people know the Art Center for one thing that they're interested in, if it's a studio class or if it's coming to a show or the museum, but rarely do they know all of the interworkings.
Yeah.
But also what I like to consider the soul of the Art Center, which is our community engagement department, because we are able to leverage an expert such as yourself and National Geographic and the platform to not just have you talk here at the Mesa Arts Center, but go out into the community and work with the kids and things like that.
Right.
And it's something I'm very proud of. I would say that's my mission in life, is to make sure community engagement is a vital part of all industry and institutions. But so thank you for that.
Yeah,
I
I'm
appreciate
delighted.
that.
Yes.
What is the coolest place you've ever gone in your research of trees?
Wow. That is a great question. I've been able to go to so many cool places.
I'm sure you have.
But I'll tell you one really cool experience I had.
Okay.
In my long-term study site in a place called Monteverde, Costa Rica.
Okay.
Costa Rica is a small country in Central America. It's mountainous. It borders the ocean on both sides. But up in the mountains, there's this particular type of vegetation called a cloud forest, where warm, moist air from these oceans moves up the mountains. It cools and condenses, and you get just almost constant immersion in fog. And up there in the cloud forest is where you get these amazing developments, this amazing growth of canopy-dwelling plants like orchids and bromeliads and ferns and mosses and lichens. And every inch of those branches and trunks are just covered with these canopy-dwelling plants. So I do my research on those plants. I try to figure out, what are they doing in the ecosystem, what birds are using them, how are they using them, and so forth. But I decided to spend the night up in the canopy one time, and I had this collapsible cot that mountain climbers use when they're going to climb up Half Dome in Yosemite, and they have to spend the night up there. So I got one of these cots, and you can hang it on branches. And so I climbed up there just as sunset was happening, and so it was dark. And it was darker and darker, and I realized, oh my gosh, I'm just surrounded in 3 dimensions by dark night and this, 100 feet above the forest floor. And I settled into my little cot, and about 2 a.m, I heard this little scrabbling sound. I thought, oh my God, who's that? So I opened up my tent covering, my cot covering, and there was an arboreal anteater.
What?
And it was collecting leafcutter ants that were walking along the branches.
Wow.
And I looked at it, and it looked at me, and we just stared at each other, these 2 mammals, in the middle of the cloud forest canopy, in the middle of the night. And it was just a remarkable moment. I mean, it wasn't, it wasn't like a dangerous animal or anything, but it was just this unexpected encounter with a wild animal that I didn't think would be up there. And to me, it was a moment of privilege and of joy that I was able to stare into this animal's eyes. And then he turned around and walked away. I turned around and went back to sleep. But it was a great moment.
Oh, I love it.
Yeah.
That was such a good story. I was going with you on the journey. I loved it. So I got 2 kind of final questions that I think I want to, drive home this conversation. And for the record, I can talk to you for hours. One is So one of the most incredible experiences I had with trees was when I was 29 years old and I went to the redwood forest for the first time. And I remember, and I don't remember the name of the movie, but my grandfather watched this movie when I was a kid, and it had the redwoods in it. And I remember the movie, the trees being ginormous, and then going and really seeing the colossal size of these trees. How does a tree become? It was almost like I was looking at dinosaurs in a way. And I had this such a very like almost out of body experience because I felt like I was in this mystical, magical space. How does a tree become so massive like that?
Well, obviously not every tree does grow so massively, but redwood trees in particular do have this sort of, I guess I'd call it a forest superpower of being able to grow bigger and bigger and bigger. They are very good at withstanding certain kinds of disturbances. So fires, for example, go through the redwood forest very regularly. They burn down the fuels and so forth when they're allowed to burn naturally. But redwood trees have evolved this very, very thick bark. Like it can be a foot thick.
Yeah.
And so that allows it to withstand these repeated disturbances of fire, to withstand it, not to sort of get hurt and then grow back, but actually to withstand it. That's one type of resilience that we know. Ecological resilience is to be able to withstand disturbances like that. So that's one of the reasons why they can do that. And what has resulted then are, these giant redwood trees. Like the biggest tree in the world is named General Sherman, the General Sherman tree. And it's 100 feet in circumference. So that's an enormous tree.
It's incredible. If you haven't seen it, I highly recommend going and looking at that.
It is. It inspires awe.
Yes.
It's not just the beauty. It inspires awe at the amazing and they're not even the oldest trees in the world. Like the bristlecone pines, those are the ones that are 4,000 plus years old. But those sequoia trees are really. They look so gigantic, and they are so gigantic that we, as these tiny little figures, you just feel like, oh, I'm only 2 inches high. Is something I think you're right. You're right, Tomas. Everybody should have the opportunity to take a look and feel, not just see and not just read the dimensions of 100 feet in circumference. That doesn't do it. You have to really be there to feel and sense the magnificence and the awe that those trees inspire.
It reminded, when I was there, I remember this vividly. It reminded me of the importance of really remembering how small you are in this world, right? But also to be in nature and to be in something that is, so what I love about nature is it is both harmonious and violent at times, right? It's this very beautiful, delicate balance of what I think it is to be a human and to live.
Right.
But going into nature and really experiencing it, especially when you see something so massive, you're like, oh yeah, this is incredible.
Yeah, and when you were talking about that, it made me think about the stars. And sometimes, when you go to a place that's really dark and you look up at the stars and you go like, oh my God, look how far away the stars are. It's a different sense than that because trees are living things, where stars are not, as far as we know.
Yeah.
And so I think that juxtaposition of our size and our lifespan compared to this living thing's size and lifespan is somehow, it drives it more home, or it makes it more connectable.
Yeah, I love it. So here's the last question, and this, I don't know that it has anything to do with trees, but it's an observation that I've made in this conversation. You have an amazing positive energy. And I don't say that lightly because I think I love positive energy. I'm going to say something that might be funny, maybe a little sad, but I tend to sometimes be a little mopey. Life is like, weighing me down. I'm raising kids. It's tough.
Yeah.
Being in this space with you, your energy is so infectious in a positive way. How do you do that? What is the science or the routine behind your positive outlook and energy in life?
Wow, nobody's ever asked me that before. I mean, I know I have positive energy. I tend to be positive.
Yeah.
And maybe it is my connection to trees, the fact that I really do think about trees. I'm with trees. I do research on trees. I write about trees. I talk about trees. And so maybe it's the positive energy that comes from the world of the arboreal world that has somehow sunk into me.
Maybe.
And has lodged itself there in a positive way so that I then in turn can exude sort of a positive energy to other people and other things in this world. I'll try to hold on to it because I do think it's important in this world that faces increasing disturbance, social disturbances, political disturbances, ecological disturbances, most of all, that we do need to keep a positive energy personally and with the people we interact with in order to counter the despair that we can encounter, I'm afraid, every single day. And I feel that part of my work is about helping to maintain myself and people on this sort of knife ridge between despair and hope. We fall too much on despair, which is very natural to do because there are so many despairing things. We become immobilized and we say, well, why bother doing anything? Why get out of bed in the morning? Why just watch Netflix all day?
Yeah.
But if we fall too much on the side of hope, we say, oh, the mayor's going to take care of it, or the city arborists are going to take care of it, and then we don't do anything ourselves.
Yeah.
So I think there's a really healthy ridge line that we have to align ourselves with in order to continue to recognize the things that are causing despair, but also work productively to the things that we can be positive about.
Yeah, I love that. And I appreciate that because I do think that we all have the potential to possess that energy and to exude that energy. It's a mind shift. And I am not surprised at all. I think you're right. I think being in nature and being around trees and understanding the value of that ecosystem will give you positive energy. It makes me think of a quote. It's I think it's a South African quote, and it said, "The role of a poet in the society is to show the people where the water well is." And when the people in the village forget where the water well is, it's the job of the poet to guide them back. And I think of it metaphorically of like water is life, and it is not even a discussion that trees are equally as valuable in regards to life. And there are people in this world who I think are poets, such as yourself, and your job is to remind the people where the water well is, the importance of life and the ecosystem. And so I think I just commend you so much for the work you're doing.
Well, thank you, Tomas. I appreciate that. I will remember that. Thank you.
Yeah. All right. So I ask these questions to everybody. They're just very casual. What is your favorite ice cream?
Pistachio, undoubtedly.
Undoubtedly pistachio.
Trees produce pistachio nuts.
There you
and
go.
there they are in my ice cream cone.
All right. And what is one book that you recommend everybody read in life?
There's a book by a poet named Italo Calvino called The Baron in the Trees.
Okay.
And it's about a young man who was told to eat snails by his father. He refused to do it. His father punished him, and he said, then I'm going to live in the trees for the rest of my life. And he did. And this book is all about how he sort of figured out how to live a life productively and connectedly in the treetops of Italy.
I love it. I love it.
The Baron in the Trees.
The Baron in the Trees.
Yeah.
Well, Nalini, thank you so much. I appreciate everything you're doing. I hope you enjoy your time here in Mesa, and we look forward to connecting whenever we connect again.
Great.
All
Thank
right.
you so much,
All right.
Tomas.
Thank you so
Thank you,
much.
Mesa.
And thank you for listening to the Mesa Arts Center podcast. Have a great day.